Hello, I'm Roland Barton, and welcome to this special edition of News One Now. Is school choice the black choice? School choice simply means that parents can choose the right school for their kids, traditional public schools, public charter schools, private schools, religious schools, even the use of vouchers. Right now, there's a raging controversy over school choice in America, but especially among African Americans. Supporters of school choice argue that traditional public schools have failed our kids miserably, that charter schools and choice are crucial to the future of black children in the black community. Plus, our survey last year, black parents found an overwhelming majority want the choice to send their kids to charter schools or get a voucher to help pay for a private or religious school. Opponents of school choice, including the NAACP and the Congressional Black Caucus, claim that charter schools and vouchers result in unregulated, substandard schools, disrupt our communities, and siphon off needed monies from underfunded public school systems. So we convened 16 educators, advocates, and experts to share their views with parents and teachers, as well as students, at a town hall here in Washington, D.C. on the campus of Howard University. All this against the backdrop of the move by the NAACP board to ratify a resolution calling for a moratorium on the opening of any new charter schools. Hello, folks. I'm Roland Martin, and welcome to this town hall. Is school choice the black choice? We're here on the campus of Howard University. One of the reasons we chose this location because Howard is the only HBCU in America with a charter school. And so we wanted to be able to thank President Dr. Wayne Frederick for allowing us to actually be here. Thank you so very much. And so this is what we want to do. And the reason I want to do this is because this is a controversial issue, that is of school choice, ed reform. And when it comes to African Americans, I wanted to have a black conversation. All the panelists are black, all the experts are black. And the reason being because when you look at what's happening with education in this country, for the first time last year, 51% of all kids in public schools were black and brown. We're not going backwards, we're going forward. So the real question is, does school choice make sense for African Americans? And so we look forward to this spirited conversation. We've got some phenomenal experts, advocates, and educators, folks on both sides of the issue. So let's get with it. Please welcome our panel. Steve Perry, I'll start with you. Why is the NAACP wrong, and why are you right?
The NAACP, well, first of all, thank you, Roland, for having this event. Folks, give it up for Roland for pulling us together. And big ups to you for coming out to have a conversation about education in the black community. It just shows how much we all care, regardless of what side we are of the issue. The reason why the NAACP is wrong is because, like so many other government systems, the public education system has failed the black community. It's not just a school to prison pipeline, it's a school to prison superhighway. If you look very quickly, you'll see that our children are some 12% of the population in many of the school systems, yet we make up 40% of the children who are expelled. Our children are 3.5 times as likely to be suspended. They make up 70% of those arrested in the schools. Only 68% of them in many states will ever graduate. And in fact, what you ultimately find is that those people who end up in prison tend to be the ones who go to the schools that are the failure factories. And so what we find is that the traditional public school system has failed us miserably and continues to do so. If it were being successful, then there would be no such thing as a charter school today. In fact, the reason why there is choice is because that which we had was insufficient. And take it finally one step here. At the current rate of growth within the traditional school system, it would take African Americans 286 years to close the achievement gap. If all we did was give every single black child, only black child, access to the highest quality instructors, that being the top 25%, we could close that achievement gap, according to Harvard researchers, in 8 years. And then the final part is this. Over 700,000 black people have made it abundantly clear that their parents, and they don't need the NAACP or any local officials telling them where to send their children to school.
Hillary Shelton, Representative of the NAACP. We also invited out Cornell Brooks, the president and CEO, but he had other obligations, so certainly glad to have you here. Why did the NAACP, national body, pass this resolution at its convention? Why do they want a national moratorium?
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate having this conversation. Since we passed this resolution, one of the things that's been most fascinating to me is that I'm not convinced that a lot of people's responses understand what the definition of moratorium means. Moratorium means we have to stop for a minute. What we recognize that over the last 15 years, we've seen a growth in charter schools that in somewhere between 300 to 700 per year, as we've seen that growth. The challenge is that they don't have very much oversight. There is very little focus on what they're doing and how they're doing it. And quite frankly, what we've seen in some cases, now don't get me wrong, the bottom line for the NAACP is we want high quality education for all of our children. We want to make sure they have what they need, whether it's a public school. Don't forget, we've never had a problem suing public schools either, taking them all the way to the Supreme Court when necessary. If they're not providing the services we need for our children, then we're going to have to address that. And we'll utilize the courts, we'll utilize elections and everything else to address those concerns. What we've seen in these cases is African-American children are not graduating at a faster rate from charter schools than they are from public schools. What we also know is that the oversight that's provided for charter schools is much less. We have charter schools, believe it or not, that actually hire teachers that don't even have bachelor's degrees. They hire teachers that don't even have certification. So in essence, if you're going to talk about high quality and you're talking about the problems we have in the public schools, let's talk about that because there are plenty of problems there. But let's at least use those standards as the lower standards and shoot for something higher. Should we not have better facilities, better teachers, better curriculums, and things that actually work? Now, I know some charter schools that work just fine, and we're very proud of those as well. But the truth of the matter is, we've got schools right here, even in Washington, D.C., that I can tell you the teachers don't have degrees, they don't have certification, and I can tell one, I'm not going to name names, but I can tell you about one in which the head of the school actually gave herself a PhD. We know we have problems, we want to solve that. Let's stop for a minute. Let's look at what's going on. Let's make sure the resources are utilized in a way that's going to be most helpful, that our children are going to do the best they possibly can. And we see, of course, the last thing I'll say, Roland, look, we know education is that bridge over troubled water. It's that ladder out of poverty. We cannot allow people to play with our education systems so they can make riches for themselves. We need good schools, no matter what you want to call them.
Rudy, I want to ask you, you ran the school system in New York. To Steve's point, if traditional schools were doing their job, there wouldn't be a need for charter schools. There wouldn't be a need for school choice. Is it true or not that school choice is a reflection of the failure of traditional schools to educate our children?
Thank you again for allowing me to be here. To the point, I guess I don't see it quite that sharply. I do think that there is a relationship between the anxiety, the tension, the anger that has been part and parcel of the disruption, really, of public education, which sorely needed to happen, I might add. And to that extent, it actually did lead to the creation of more legislation and a body of work around charter schools. But I think the point that I'd want to make about this is in New York City or in Miami, where I was superintendent, or Sacramento, where I was superintendent, or Tacoma, Washington, where I was superintendent, no matter where it has been, there's a third, if not more, of the children for whom that school system is basically useless. There's a third of the youngsters who are perennially left behind. Now, if I were to look at the scattergram of all the charter schools in the United States, I would tell you that you're going to find about that same representation of students who are not being served by your charter schools. You're looking at about a third of the population for whom schooling, as it is currently situated, is literally dysfunctional, and families are trying to figure out what to do about that. So when I was in New York, yes, there were schools that were so dysfunctional that parents said, give me anything but this. The issue is when you start talking about the but this, you have to actually start asking yourself as an educator, well, then what does it look like to have real choice in the Black community? A choice between a poor performing school and another poor performing school is no choice. A choice between a non-performing charter school and a non-performing public school is no choice. But the idea of there being choice in the Black community is, in my mind, every bit as historically valuable and as economically viable as choice within the economic market. We ought to have a market of ideas of schools that are out there, but I think to the point that was just raised, but they've got to be at a standard that represents something that really is a quality choice. Otherwise, these are just Hobson's choices. These are choices among unequals. It's a fake choice. And so when I hear people talking about the charter movement, I'm thinking, well, all right, that's 5%. That's maybe a 5% solution. You got 30%, 40% of our youngsters who are at risk. So the question of a 5% solution to a 40% problem is really, I don't know, you do the math, but I can tell you, it's not going to be a system that essentially replaces the public school system. My last point about this is either you're going to have a public school system of some quality, and we're going to invest in that. We're going to invest in good teachers. We're going to invest in paying people the amount that it takes to basically get people who are certified and qualified and able to do this work in a content-rich and global world, or you're not. And the second you stop doing it, then you create little places like places in Newark or little itty-bitty enclaves in New York City and other places where the only way you can get change, the only way you can get anything in is to literally bootleg it through a charter this or a new that. In Rudy Giuliani's case, it was, let me create a voucher system. Well, you see how far that got me. So all I would say is, if you're talking about real choice, then make real public school choices out of public schools. Invest in those facilities, invest in those teachers, invest in the leadership, invest in the quality teaching, invest in the technology, invest in fixing the facilities up so that parents then can look at what essentially is choice A and choice B and have them be, if you will, both high quality choices.
Ramona, 2009, I'm on Air Force One with President Obama and with several members of the Black press. And I began to ask him about education. And I did ask him about school vouchers. We're going to get to that in the second hour of this conversation. And he said, Roland, I know where you're going. He said, but if every kid could get a voucher, I support it. I said, well, but you support charters, every kid can't go. Rudy, you talked about choice. I went to magnet schools. Every kid couldn't go to a magnet school. That was an application process. Ramona, we hear folks say, oh, charters will kill the public school system. That's what was said in D.C. Look at the percentage of kids who are in charter schools in D.C. compared to a traditional school system. Traditional school system is still here. Charter system is still here. What's the problem with both coexisting?
I don't see a problem with both coexisting, and I'm not aware of anyone saying that charters should take over the entire system, although in one or two places, New Orleans among them, that may be being tried. That's certainly not what we espouse. In D.C., about 45% of all public school children attend charter schools. The number is about 39,000, but there's another 20,000 on waiting lists, waiting to go.
So 39,000 in charters, but 20,000 who want to get in.
Yes, yes. Nationally, there are 3 million children in charter schools and over 1 million on waiting lists, waiting to get in. So it's perfectly true that there are not enough high-quality charter schools right now. And there are a number of reasons for that. But we need to be a bit more sophisticated in our analysis because it certainly is not the case here in D.C. that our schools are not carefully monitored, that the charter schools fall below a standard that's held by the traditional public schools. On the contrary, if traditional public schools were held to the same standards as the chartered public schools, we wouldn't have such a failure rate in the District of Columbia and in other cities that have in fact created the charter school option here. These schools were failing miserably for more than 3 decades before charter schools were provided as an option.
Don, when you hear that number, 1 million on the waiting list, that means that folks are saying, what I currently have, I don't like, I want to get into that. And in fact, last year, we conducted a poll. We had Brilliant Corners Research, Cornell Belcher's firm, top pollster for President Obama in 2008, 2012, do this poll. And this is exactly what we discovered. We discovered that 74% of black parents with school-age kids said they would be interested in sending their own kid to a public charter school. 18% said no. We even asked them about the issue of vouchers, 70% favored vouchers, 19%. These were black parents. So what do we tell black parents if the NAACP, Congressional Black Caucus, and black civil rights groups opposing school choice, but black parents are saying, your kids probably go to private school, we only have this choice here, this is what we want to do? There's a problem here because it seems like black parents have spoken.
Kickstart your day at 7 and get the news you need from the perspective you want. News 1 Now with Roland Martin, every weekday morning at 7 on TV 1.